Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Andrew. I broke the previous presentation, as you heard. Hopefully, this one doesn't get broken. So among other things, I don't just break presentations. I also break web applications and such. I'm a security engineer, but a passing interest of mine is researching surveillance technologies and specifically how people can avoid being surveilled by whatever they might be worried about getting surveilled by. So today I'm going to be talking about GrapheneOS and giving some practical tips for evading the panopticon. So a quick outline of our talk today. First, I'm going to give some motivation for why I'm giving this talk, what we're going to be talking about, why we should care about any of this. We're going to talk about some of the privacy issues that are inherent to Android, default Android, stock Android as I'm going to refer to it. Then we're going to talk about Android's security model and how exploits, like if you've heard of Pegasus and stuff like that, how those exploits on a high level, how they work. We're going to talk about Android's disk encryption and how that works. We're going to talk about how tools like Celebrite exploits that disk encryption. And then we're going to talk about GrapheneOS and how it defends against all of these things, and then also what it cannot defend you from. Finally, I'm going to give a few tips about practical implications of all of this. So if you decide to use GrapheneOS, how you can use it and what it will mean for you. And then at the end, I'm going to have citations. Throughout this talk, you're going to notice that on my slides, I have little footnotes. Those points to some slides at the end. I'm going to upload all these slides to GitHub after this talk. So if you want to fact check me, feel free. And also it means that if you don't feel pressured to take pictures of slides if there's useful information on there. All of that will be accessible after the talk, even before the recording goes out. OK, so first, some motivation. Why should we care about privacy at all? Well, your phone is a federal informant. I say this for a number of reasons. I have a quick sizzle reel of news articles here. The Department of Homeland Security recently spent millions of dollars to buy cell phone data and use that to track Americans both inside and outside of the US. Foreign governments as well might be spying on your notifications on your phones. Celebrite has been increasingly used by the federal government to crack people's phones. It's also used abroad in, for example, Jordan to crack dissidents' phones. And ICE, who I'm sure we all have great opinions on, is using fake cell towers in order to spy on people. They also bought a tool that tracks hundreds of millions of phones every day. So this is obviously pretty bad, I would say. Who is at risk of this kind of surveillance, though? Activists, obviously. Lawyers, journalists, at-risk demographics like queer people, people who are seeking abortions, immigrants, etc. Some security researchers are also at risk of especially being targeted by foreign governments. You probably have loved ones who fall into at least one of these categories. Let's see if a show of hands, who here has a close friend or a loved one who is one of these things? That is the entire room. That is literally everybody.
We're all security engineers.
OK, sure. What if we don't count the last category? Let's get another show of hands. OK, that is still the exact same entire room. This is something that I don't think I necessarily have to address, but I'm going to do it anyways. Whenever we talk about privacy, there's always somebody who's like, well, why should I care about privacy? I have nothing to hide. Well, you don't have to be a criminal in order to be targeted by a government. For example, here's a statistic. 70% of people who were deported by ICE last year had no criminal convictions. Let that sink in for a little bit. Also, journalists and lawyers, even if they're entirely above board, entirely doing everything exactly legally, they still have to be extra diligent about OPSEC because it's not just their security that matters, it's the security of their clients or of their sources, etc. This talk, I'm going to focus on 3 categories of threats against Android. Leakage of private data. So kind of standard privacy stuff as you might think of it. I'm going to talk about remote compromise of your devices, so 0 days and such. And local device compromises, so Celebrite. With all that, let's launch into the first category, data privacy. The question that I want to address here is what data leaves your phone before anyone has a chance to seize your phone? Obviously, we cannot talk about data privacy without talking about data brokers. Data brokers are companies that collect, buy, and sell personal data. And for them, data from people's mobile phones is extremely valuable. When I talk about extremely valuable, here's SafeGraph is one data broker. They pay between $1 and $4 per user per year to app developers for access to their location data. So you can imagine if you are an app developer and you made some GPS app that has 100,000 users, you can make 100K from selling their location data to this one data broker. Ventil is another massive data broker. They give the feds access to their database for like $20,000 per 12,000 queries or so. Many data brokers have contracts which are worth $500,000 or more. And the market for data from mobile phones is worth more than $12 billion globally. Moreover, Google is a data broker. Google obviously makes Android. We don't tend to think of them as a data broker. We think of them as a tech company, but 75% of their revenue comes from targeted advertising. For all intents and purposes, their business model is that of a data broker. They don't necessarily sell your data to other people, but they use your data in order to profit and sell advertisements to other people. So what data do these data brokers collect? Location, very obviously. In fact, Android is able to collect your location even if you disable your GPS. They can estimate your location from what nearby Wi-Fi network names are. Data brokers love collecting what apps you have installed. This might not seem too sensitive at first, but it turns out 99.4% of users can be uniquely fingerprinted by the list of installed apps. When you think about it, like, it is very unlikely that anyone out there has the exact same set of apps installed on their phone as you do. People probably have very strong overlaps, but there's almost never going to be anyone who has the exact same list of apps. Contacts obviously are extremely valuable. You can use that to profile connections between people, see who's friends with whom. If you're like a government like trying to surveil activists or something, for example, that is going to be extremely useful. Hardware IDs and advertising IDs are also going to be great for being able to associate data that is aggregated en masse with like particular devices. And crash analytics, diagnostic info, et cetera, et cetera. There are millions of things that data brokers love collecting from your devices. Here is an image I have. Babel Street is a data broker. This is a screenshot that a private investigator took of them using their service in order to view all of the unique mobile devices as seen in a mosque in Michigan. I don't think I have to like spell out too much about why this is especially creepy and dangerous. But each of the red dots, I'm not sure how visible it is for the audience, but each of those red dots is a unique data point of we saw a particular device at this location at a particular time. And this location data, it's not just for advertising, right? If you have enough location data points, you can see home addresses, like where people spend the night. You can see like a target's religion and place of worship, as we saw in the previous example. We can see associations between people, so like which devices frequently appear nearby other devices. We can see people's travel history, when they cross borders, et cetera. We can see lists of people who visit sensitive locations, so like abortion clinics, embassies, support groups for at-risk individuals, et cetera. If there's a protest happening, location data can be used to figure out who went there. So this isn't just a matter of data brokers using this for advertising. That is like that is how we think of their business model usually, but the federal government can use this data for a whole lot more than just advertising. How's this data collected from phones? Obviously, it is collected directly through the operating system by Google, Samsung, whoever manufactures your particular device. In fact, Samsung devices will send analytics both to Google because it's Android and to Samsung because it's Samsung Android. So you kind of get a 2-for-1 special there. Android and iOS both send telemetry on average like once every 5 minutes, even if your phone is completely idle and you're not using it whatsoever. This happens even if you select like opt out of collection, telemetry, privacy, whatever. If you opt out literally everywhere, you will still be sending telemetry at least once every 5 minutes. Moreover, app developers can directly sell your data to data brokers or on what is called a bid stream auction. So that is where there is an auction for people can say, hey, I want right now to show an ad for someone fitting this demographic info in this location. And then app developers can sell your device basically on this auction house. The person who's buying that is both able to show an advertisement to you and is able to immediately know your location. They know like, oh, someone fitting this demographic info was in this location at this time. Advertising SDKs get embedded in apps all the time, and those are collecting as much data as they possibly can and sending it off to data brokers. In fact, 90% of apps on the Google Play Store have some sort of tracker embedded in them. Who buys this data? Well, other data brokers. There is a whole market of selling data from data broker to data broker. In the process of researching this talk, I actually saw a government document where they were complaining about how one of the data brokers that they have a contract with was actually just buying data from a different data broker and then selling it for a higher price. Okay. Advertisers, obviously. Insurance companies love getting data so that they can see exactly like how high of a premium they should charge you. The cops, the FBI, the DHS, ICE, et cetera, they love data. Buying location does not require a warrant. Getting your location from obviously the feds can go to AT&T and say, hey, tell me which cell tower this customer was closest to at this time. That requires a warrant. Buying someone's location data does not. The military also loves buying people's data, but if you are worried about getting airstriked, I cannot help you, I'm sorry. What about data that doesn't get sold? A lot of data is collected by Google and Apple or Samsung or whoever. They don't sell it to anybody, but they're still storing it on their servers. Even when they're not using it for targeted advertising, it's still a liability. For example, push notifications. All push notifs on Android and iOS have to go through Google or Apple's servers. This is like a concern for battery optimization. If you have every single app on your phone constantly pinging different servers to get push notifs, that's going to drain your battery really quickly. So instead, they all reach out to one centralized server, and when an app wants to send you a notification, they send it to Apple or Google first, and then it forwards it to your phone. The feds routinely subpoena these message contents and use that for surveillance. Up until recently, Apple didn't even require a warrant from the feds in order to turn over people's notifications. And with most apps, this means that the cops can just see all of the data in there. Even if you're using like a secure messaging app like Signal or whatever, they still get metadata. So in the case of Signal, when they send you a push notification, they just send they send null to Apple or Google, and then that notification gets forwarded to your phone, and then that tells the Signal app, hey, you should reach out to the Signal server to pull a message. So your message contents aren't in the notification, but it still tells the cops that this person received a message at this exact timestamp, and that is itself useful. Some apps that claim to be end-to-end encrypted actually inadvertently end up leaking message contents because they just put them into push notifications, send them off to Google, and then don't think about it. This is pretty rare. Like I said, Signal doesn't do that. I think WhatsApp doesn't do that, but they might be leaking some other data, I forget. So the bottom line of this section is stock Android does not provide any kind of guarantee of privacy. How about security? Let's talk about Android's security model. So Android, as you may know, is based on Linux, but it has its own additional security model which is layered on top of this. The key components of that are SE Linux, which has mandatory deny by default access control for all processes, both system and user processes. So if a process tries to access something, it needs to be explicitly allowed to access that, and it will be denied by default otherwise. Application sandboxing, this is the most critical one. Each app that you have on your phone runs as a separate Linux user with a different user ID. Apps can't access each other's data without inter-process communication, which requires both apps starting communication. Starting with Android 9, so quite a while now, each app runs in its own separate SE Linux context. And starting with Android 10, apps have only very, very limited direct access to your file system. For the most part, they should not have access to the vast majority of your files. Permissions, this is the one that's the most user-facing and obvious. Users have to explicitly grant apps access to their location, their contacts, et cetera. And the final piece of the puzzle is verified boot. So when you are booting up your Android phone, it will be cryptographically verifying every single stage of that boot process, starting from a hardware root of trust. We will talk more about those later. Usually you also have something called rollback protection, which if there is a vulnerability in a given version of Android and the user upgrades to a newer one which patches that out, an attacker shouldn't be able to then just downgrade their OS back down to the older version. Usually this is implemented with an eFuse. I can't remember, yeah, whatever. Sandboxing, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. App sandboxing has two main benefits. Installing a malicious app does not immediately compromise your full system. If you are on a Windows machine, right, or just a laptop, right? If you install a malicious app, it's going to immediately start reading your Discord tokens and trying to mine Bitcoin and trying to scrape your cache for whatever keys it can find, et cetera. On Android, if you install a malicious app, it should not be able to access other apps' data. Similarly, if there's a vulnerability in a legitimate app, so like a buffer overflow or something, it's going to have reduced impacts because you need to, after exploiting that buffer overflow, you need to also escape from the sandbox that the app is running in. As a result, a typical exploit chain, which is used by an attacker, is going to look something like, one, you get code execution. After that, you have to escape from a sandbox. Then you escalate privileges, you establish persistence, and then you exfiltrate data. Just a second. So the main attack surfaces for that initial code execution are going to be stuff like media parsing. So if there are images getting parsed or PDFs getting rendered, fonts, these are all places that require like pretty complex logic. So there is very often vulnerabilities found there. Messaging apps and VoIP services. In particular, a lot of Android 0 days have the initial point of compromise is WhatsApp. Some sort of 0 day there, and then the attacker pivots from there. Browser engines are another big one. Chrome 0 days are huge. This one's less common, but it is still an attack surface of like baseband and like the firmware for the chip on your device that actually interacts with like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And local USB exploits, so exploits that you can do locally by plugging something into the phone and doing something that way. All of these exploits, they are usually deployed to deploy spyware for nation states, right? Unlike on like a desktop computer where a lot of the malware that you see is people, once again, trying to mine crypto or like steal your credentials for something or whatever. In this case, if you have malware on your Android phone, I would say odds are that is the result of some sort of nation state attack. So let's talk about nation state spyware. There is a large market for this, just like with location data. As an example, the NSO group sells Pegasus, which you have likely heard of. Intellexa sells a competing product called Predator. Kandiru has Sherlock, and so on. These exploits, they are sold to governments in order to target journalists, dissidents, politicians, human rights lawyers, just like all the cool people, basically. And it can be routinely sold for millions of dollars. In like some of them, I saw one. It was a contract for. You could have 15 concurrent infections for $15 million. And then if you wanted to infect someone else, you had to either pay $15 more million or like drop one of your old infections. Exploits like these are usually either one-click exploits. So like somebody goes to a page in their browser and that exploits their browser, or they open a file that exploits the PDF renderer, or they might even be zero-click. So like you send a message to someone and it instantly compromises them. A quick note about patches, so security patches. The Android's ecosystem is very complicated. It's not just like, just Microsoft rolling out patches or just Apple. You have a whole bunch of OEMs, a whole bunch of vendors. Each of them has different Android versions, different hardware, and so on. So there is often a very large gap of time between when a patch gets released and when the vendor actually applies the patch and rolls it out to users. So attackers can often use publicly available end days as 0 days, where it is already publicly known that this is a vulnerability. People know what the vulnerability is. There is maybe even a patch that has been like publicly released for it, but it hasn't been applied to basically anyone, so attackers can just use it as a 0 day. In fact, in 2022, this is a Google analysis, variants of known vulnerabilities, known 0 days, accounted for 40% of in the wild exploited 0 days. So even users who have very, very good patch hygiene can be vulnerable. So to summarize the state of Android security, you have sandboxing and strict permissioning, which makes remotely exploiting these phones pretty difficult, but still feasible for nation-state attackers. Now, we talked about attackers getting data from your device through data brokers and through spyware. What if they can seize your device? Let's talk about device encryption. So on Android, you have two types of device encryption. I saw a little dance in the audience when I got to this point. You have full disk encryption, which was supported on Android 5 through Android 9. It's no longer supported on modern versions. It would encrypt just all of your user data with a key which would be protected by your PIN. And then as a result, after you would reboot, until you would put in that PIN for the first time, your phone calls, your alarms, etc., they wouldn't work because the data can't be decrypted. So later, Android rolled out something called file-based encryption, starting from Android 7 onwards. So here, for each user, you have two different storage spaces, credential encrypted, CE storage, and device encrypted, DE storage. Data which needs to be accessible before you unlock the phone for the first time is in DE storage. So like data that is necessary for like connecting to Wi-Fi, receiving phone calls, getting alarms, etc. Everything else goes into CE storage. So let's look at exactly what goes into DE storage, because obviously it is in a less secure state than CE storage. You have device info, so like your IMEI, your MAC addresses, what patch version you're running on, etc. You have SIM card data. You have what accounts are in use on the device. If you have like Google accounts that are signed in, that's going to be necessary. You have saved Wi-Fi networks and their passwords. It makes sense that this needs to be accessible because your phone should be able to connect to Wi-Fi after you reboot, right? And it needs those Wi-Fi passwords in order to do that. A list of installed apps, which in this case, if someone has physical control of your device, you might be thinking like, okay, it's not too bad if they know what apps I have installed. But if you're in like an extremely authoritarian regime, the mere fact that you have like Tor installed on your phone is already just going to send you to prison. So like this is a non-negligible threat for people with some threat models. And connected Bluetooth devices are also in there. All of this info that I'm sharing here comes from an excellent write-up that I have linked by Mattia Epifani. So shout out to him. So most Android users use a PIN which is like 4 to 6 digits long, right? That's obviously not secure for encrypting your data directly. It's going to be brute forced very trivially. So instead what Android does is it encrypts credential encrypted files with a key that is stored in a secure element. And then the secure element, when you put in your PIN, it verifies that PIN. If it's correct, then it will decrypt your files for you. And the security comes from the fact that the SE is supposed to throttle like brute force attacks. Like if an attacker tries to just put in 1,000,000 pins, the secure element is supposed to throttle that very quickly. If implemented well, this should defeat like a brute force attack. We'll see later that it isn't always implemented well. Secure elements are manufacturer specific. So on modern Pixels, you have a chip called the Titan M2. You have on flagship Samsungs, so like the Samsung S24 or whatever, like the S series, those have something called the Knox Vault. On mid-range Samsungs, so like an A55 or whatever it's called, you have a trusted execution environment, which isn't a separate chip. It is like it is on the same SoC as everything else. And Qualcomm-based phones use also a trusted execution environment. So notably, only the Titan M2 and the Knox Vault are actually discrete chips. And the reason you want a discrete chip is because trusted execution environments are going to be more susceptible to like side channel attacks, et cetera. You can still have an insecure dedicated security chip, as my friend Max will tell you. But in general, it is going to be more secure if implemented correctly. If you're interested in learning more about the Titan M2, there was a good talk about it at CCC last year. So let's put it all together. An Android device can be in one of 3 states. There is before first unlock, or BFU. This is when the device is locked. You have not put in your PIN yet since the last reboot. So the OS can access device encrypted data. It cannot access credential encrypted data until you put your PIN in. There's after first unlock, which is where your device is locked, but you have put in your PIN since the last time you rebooted. So you put in a PIN, you lock the device again, but you haven't rebooted it again. In this case, the OS can access all data. And finally, unlocked, obviously, if you put your PIN in and then you don't relock the device, it's going to be unlocked. There are companies on the market who offer tools for dumping data from all 3 of these states. That brings us to Cellebrite and others. So these companies, forensic extraction companies, they offer tools for cracking mobile phones. Cellebrite is the most widespread. You've probably heard of them in a ton of cases. MSAB is like a Swedish company, if I remember correctly. They offer something called XRY. I don't think it stands for anything. They just want to sound cool. Oxygen offers Oxygen Forensic Detective. There's Graykey by Grayshift, which has since been purchased by Magnet Forensics, whatever. The point is, all of these tools are actively used by cops in the US and abroad. The real-world capabilities of these are a bit murky. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what they can and cannot do. So the reason for this is that which devices and OS versions they support is constantly changing as they find new 0 days get patched, et cetera. My best estimate of what they can and cannot do based on like leaked slide decks from the companies, like marketing materials that are publicly available, some really, really good reporting from 404 Media. Everyone, please subscribe to 404 Media. They are really good journalists. My best estimate is that full file system extraction, so like when a device is unlocked, extracting basically all data from it is pretty much always going to be possible. This makes sense, right? If you give someone your unlocked phone, they're going to be able to access all the data that you would be able to access if you have that phone. Brute forcing a PIN is impossible starting from Pixel 6 onwards because the Titan M2 does successfully throttle those brute force attacks. On iPhones, so iPhone 12 Plus, they also successfully throttle those brute force attacks. Max, do you have a lower than 12 iPhone? 11? Okay, that's terrible. And as far as I can tell, brute force attacks are possible on all other Android and iOS phones. So if you have an iPhone older than iPhone 12, or you have any Android phone that's not Pixel 6 or newer, that is your PIN is brute forceable by Celebrite or someone else. AFU unlock, so this is where you give someone, the feds sees your phone and you have unlocked it since the last time that you've rebooted. This is possible on most or all phones. It's kind of hazy about the latest generation of iPhones, but it's coming for those anyways if it's not already possible. And extracting data before first unlock is once again also possible on most or all phones. In summary, you're screwed, the feds can crack your phone. I have a bunch of sources here because this is, I think, a pretty important slide to have sourcing for. There is one exception to what I'm saying here, which is that according to leaked Celebrite slides, GrapheneOS running on a Pixel 6 or newer is immune to BFU, AFU, and brute force attacks. So that brings us finally to GrapheneOS. I know I'm like halfway through this talk and I just started talking about it, but don't worry about that. What is GrapheneOS? It's a free and open source fork of Android made by this nonprofit. It's focused on ensuring both privacy and security. It ships without any Google services installed whatsoever. And it has an option to have like sandboxed Google Play services as a compatibility layer if you need that in order to make certain apps work. For now, it only supports Google Pixel devices because of they have a whole bunch of requirements for the security of the chipset and so on. The Titan M2 is resistant to brute force attacks, which is why they chose Pixels in particular to support. They have a partnership with an unnamed OEM for sometime 2027, I think, but that hasn't happened yet. They are frequently on the cutting edge of Android security. So in fact, security features from GrapheneOS sometimes get merged into upstream Android. And overall, they are very well regarded within the security community. Let's talk about their defenses against specifically Celebrite. You have this option of a configurable auto reboot. So if your device is by default for 12 hours, if your device is inactive for 12 hours, nobody unlocks it for 12 hours, it will automatically reboot, which will reset your device to a BFU state, which is much harder to crack. You can configure that. On my phone, I have it to 2 hours just because, I don't know, I might as well. Their page allocator zeroes out all memory after it is freed. As soon as you free any memory, it instantly gets zeroed out, which defends against key leakage. So if you have a key stored in memory somewhere, as soon as it is no longer being used, it is immediately zeroed out. And then also this makes use after freeze significantly harder to exploit. You can also, on the hardware level, disable USB. What this means is that by default, when your device is locked, it will block any new USB connections. And then once you have no active USB connections, it will literally turn off the data lines in your USB port so that the only thing that can happen with that port is providing power to your device. And you are actually able to turn it on such that this is always the case. Like no matter if you have no use for using your USB port for data transfer, you can just make it so that the data lines are always turned off. This means that you can use the NSA charging station securely. Which I know is something that we have always wanted. It says, you want to try it at the bottom there. It also has, so we talked about defense against Celebrite. Let's talk about their defenses against like privacy-focused issues. You have non-persistent Wi-Fi MAC address randomization on by default. Every single other major operating system that I have looked at has an insecure default for MAC address randomization. If you're not familiar, basically, whenever you're scanning for Wi-Fi networks, your phone is broadcasting a MAC address that you are using for that device. So an advanced adversary can set up a bunch of sniffers across a city and then like correlate, oh, we saw this MAC address at this location at this time. I gave a talk on this last year if you want more details. You can automatically disable Bluetooth if you haven't used it for 10 minutes or an hour or however long. This is very useful because first of all, Bluetooth MAC addresses are never randomized on any device that I have ever seen. And furthermore, also this just reduces your attack surface. By default, the feature of being able to triangulate your position in addition to GPS, getting more accurate estimates by looking at nearby network names, that feature is turned off by default. You have an option to actually proxy to Apple's servers and estimate that way. And for stuff like captive gateway detections, et cetera, basically anywhere that normal Android would use Graphene servers, or would use Google servers rather, it will instead use Graphene servers. This is kind of a mixed bag. In particular for captive gateways, this means that anytime you connect to an open Wi-Fi network, they will see that you are a Graphene user because you're pinging a Graphene server. And this is happening before you can get the chance to turn on a VPN, because this is when you're first trying to connect to the network. So there is an option to actually just use Google servers instead. Kind of depending on your threat model, this might or might not be worth it. Let's talk more about Google Play services. So on standard Android devices, Google Play services run as a system application. There is no way to disable them without rooting your phone. And as we saw earlier, Google's service for push notifications is a major privacy risk. So Graphene ships without Google Play services by default, and it has an optional compatibility layer for having a sandboxed user mode Google Play services. It doesn't run as a system user. You can also, and this is really important, you can limit Google Play services to just specific user profiles, which we'll talk about shortly, which means that you don't have to have all of your apps running in the same kind of in the same area as Google stuff and proxying all of your notifications through Google. One issue, though, is that without Google Play services, basically no app will show notifications. You just won't receive notifications for anything except on my phone, I receive Signal notifications. They have their own custom thing, but anything else that's not a system app just won't give you notifications. That is a potential problem. There is this software called Unified Push. They claim to have some decentralized, privacy-focused replacement for Google Play notifications. I can't personally vouch for it. I haven't looked into it very much, but it is an option. So user profiles, I just mentioned them. Let's talk about more. This is a default Android feature, but it is expanded greatly on Graphene. On default Android, I think you can only have 3 or 4. On Graphene, you can have 32. And the way they work is these are isolated workspaces. So if you have a work profile on your phone, this is the exact same thing, but you don't have to have your company manage it. They have separate apps. They have separate profile data, so contacts, images, et cetera. They have separate credential encrypted storage. So you can have different pins for different users, and they will have different encryption keys. This also means that you will be able to, if you press the end session button on a profile, it will return to a before first unlock state. So you can have the rest of your phone operating normally, but any data in that specific profile will be in a BFU state. Optionally, you can forward notifications across profiles if you want to. And you can disable the ability to install apps in a specific profile. A good setup that I recommend for most people, if you're trying to set up GrapheneOS, a good profile setup is having one owner profile, which is just an app store and nothing else. And then from there, you have one profile which has trusted and sensitive apps, so your Signal, your whatever else you might trust and really care about data from. You have a profile for untrusted apps, whatever you want to install. And then you have a profile for apps that specifically require Google Play services. And then you install Google Play only in that profile. There is a known issue where apps and websites can actually communicate across profiles through the localhost loopback address. This is actually actively exploited in the wild by Meta and Yandex. So if you are installing Meta and Yandex apps for whatever reason, to be honest, don't give them network permissions. This is another thing that you can do on Graphene is you can fully disable network. By default, every app will not have access to network. You have to explicitly grant it access to the network. One more feature that I really like is storage scopes. This is, those of you who are on iOS, I think you have an equivalent to this. So whenever an app asks for access to your storage or your images or whatever, you can limit its access to just see specific files or specific images. And this is invisible to the app. So as far as the app is aware, it is seeing the whole file system and it's just mostly empty for whatever reason. You can do this, like I said, with storage, with photos, and with contacts. So we've talked about now defenses against like the Celebrate attacks, with defenses against regular privacy leaks. Let's talk about our third category, which is remote exploits like Pegasus, et cetera. Graphene ships with a number of exploit mitigations. First of all, the attack surface on Graphene is very strongly reduced compared to normal Android because it like removes most unnecessary features and services. Another big one is they have a hardened memory allocator. This has like 1 million changes from the regular Android malloc. I'm going to go into just a few of the most important ones. I mentioned earlier 0 on free, so whenever you free memory, it instantly gets zeroed out. You have a whole bunch of stack canaries just by default, regardless of whether the application is introducing them or not. You have guard regions. Whenever you allocate any memory, like a region to the right and to the left of it will be like allocated as a guard region. And starting from Pixel 8 onwards, there is ARM memory tagging, which is like a hardware level whenever every 16-byte chunk of memory is going to get its own 4-bit little tag. And then whenever a pointer tries to access memory, that pointer's tag has to match with that memory's tag in order for that memory read to succeed. This means that if there's like a buffer overflow, the attacker needs to find some way to leak this tag and then corrupts the memory with both their payload and then also that tag. Also, just-in-time compilation for JavaScript and such is disabled by default. This defends against what is called a JIT spraying attack. The TLDR on this is basically, in modern browsers, when you have JavaScript, it gets compiled just in time to have improved performance. The issue with this is that means that at runtime, there will be times when pages of memory are at the same time both writable and executable. And this obviously makes it so that it is your attack surface is strongly increased. Yeah, and in a similar vein, there is an option on Graphene to disable dynamic code loading for user apps. None of these mitigations are bulletproof, obviously. Like all of these can be bypassed in some way or another. But combined, they make it so that exploiting your phone is significantly harder. Let's revisit what I mentioned earlier with the patch gap. Like how long does it take patches to roll out on Graphene? Well, there is an option to install security patches while they are still under embargo. Something that happens in the Android ecosystem is like Google wants to release a patch for a vulnerability, but they don't want to have it such that the source code for the patch is available to the public and attackers can reverse engineer the patch and see what the actual original 0-day was and then exploit that. So they will release the patch to vendors under embargo and say, hey, you can release this patch, but you can't release the source code for this. I strongly recommend enabling this because it lets you get patches earlier. Graphene actually consistently deploys patches significantly quicker than all other Android OEMs that I know of. My friend actually published a CVE. They published the results of their CVE. They published a full paper on how to exploit it, et cetera. Graphene had it patched within a week, and it took several months later for Samsung and Google to roll out their patches for it. They actually had to, when they were testing the patch, they literally had to download Graphene because that was the only place they could find the patch. It was the only operating system that had rolled it out. The only downside of this is you can't see the source code of the patch until the embargo ends, but I think that the risk of getting supply chain attacked by Graphene is lower than the risk of getting 0-day by an active 0-day. What will Graphene not protect you from, though? First of all, app layer data collection. So if you install a malicious like GPS app and give it location permissions, like there's no helping you. Graphene can't save you from that. Cellular tracking. So those of you who have heard of stuff like stingrays, et cetera, and geofencing. So when the feds go to AT&T and say, hey, when was this device in this location? Graphene can't save you from that either. You can turn off your cellular data. And they have one other feature to only ever use LTE, so only use 4G. It turns off 2G, 3G, and 5G. This defends against downgrade attacks. You might be thinking, why are they disabling 5G? The reason is because 5G is a newer technology and it's using a lot of cutting edge code that hasn't been audited as many times. But even with this feature enabled, you're still not safe. Stingrays can still track you on 4G networks. I have there's a paper links there if you want to read more about that. And sending unencrypted data over cellular is just never going to be secure. And moreover, like Graphene can't protect you against hardware vulnerabilities. Obviously, its software is running on the operating system level. If somebody is able to compromise the actual hardware of your phone, if they're able to compromise the Titan M2, Graphene is not going to help you. Similarly, it can't help you against cops seizing your device and then just keeping it in storage for like 5 years until Celebrite finds a 0-day that works on your device. There is one feature Graphene has which can help against this, which is the duress pin. The way the duress pin works is basically, optionally, you can configure a fake pin, which if you put it in on your lock screen, it will wipe your phone. The way this is implemented is basically, when you put it in, the phone goes black. After 45 seconds, it finishes like deleting all encryption keys from anywhere on the phone. It wipes your SIM card, etc., and then just reboots. It is most likely impossible to interrupt the wiping process, at least without like significant effort. Certainly, like a cop isn't going to be able to do this in 45 seconds. However, in 2025, an activist actually used this when they were when they were stopped by CBP, I think, and they were charged with destruction or removal of property to prevent seizure. So basically, although this case is still pending, it's still like up in the air whether they actually violated any law by wiping their device, unless you are operating under very extreme circumstances, like you are in some extremely authoritarian regime and you will literally be killed if the data on your phone is decrypted. I would not recommend using the duress pin in most cases, unless you want to become like really good friends with lawyers at the EFF. Okay, Graphene, we talked a lot about how it's great and awesome. It's not for everyone though. Most people, they just want privacy from Google, or I mean, most people don't care at all, to be honest. But the people that do care, they just want privacy from Google. I imagine most of you probably aren't too scared about nation-state hackers targeting you. And the fact that GrapheneOS is only available on Pixels means that most of you probably cannot install it on your phone. So this is where other privacy-focused Android forks come in. You might have heard of LineageOS, EOS, which is a fork of Lineage, and CalyxOS. Long story short, if you don't have a Pixel and you can't install Graphene, use EOS. The reason for this is that CalyxOS recently paused their updates, like it's no longer actively maintained, and LineageOS does not support verified boot, so it offers, like, LineageOS has worse security than just stock Android. It has better privacy, but worse security. So EOS is going to be good for ensuring privacy from Google. It does not implement the vast majority of GrapheneOS's security hardening. It's better than stock Android for privacy. It doesn't do very much for security. So let's talk about using Graphene in practice. Some common issues that you might run into if you install Graphene, so I'm going to mention them before you install it. A small number of apps just don't work on Graphene. They rely on Google Play's integrity API, which just isn't supported. If you rely on a banking app day-to-day, double check whether it works. I personally do not, like my credit card apps, my banking apps, whatever, they all work on my phone. Yours might not, so double check that on the line first. There's like a list here. It's a very short list of apps with known issues, but there are some. This is a bigger one for the vast majority of people. Google Pay does not work. It cannot work because it relies on a key which is stored in the Titan M2 and is only accessible to Google. This is part of their like agreement, as far as I understand, with like payment processors. Like payment processors don't want the Google Pay system to be too open because they're scared of security. So if either of these is a deal breaker to you, you're going to be stuck with stock Android or iOS. But assuming that neither of them is a deal breaker, here's a little quick start guide. Installing Graphene is actually extremely easy. You might think that this is like some crazy like Arch thing where you're going to spend 2 hours running commands on a completely black screen. No, it's really easy. There is a web installer. You navigate to this on your desktop, you plug your phone into your desktop, you change one setting on your phone, and then you just click buttons on the installer. It's very easy. You don't have to use a command line for anything. It's accessible to non-technical users. A little checklist of things that you should absolutely make sure to do after you install is make sure that your bootloader is locked. You have to unlock it to install, obviously, and then you lock it again afterwards to ensure that you have a secure operating system. You want to create the distinct user profiles that I mentioned earlier. Any apps that are open source that you want, you can install them from F-Droid, which you might have heard of. And then if you want to install an app like, I don't know, Discord, for example, which is only available on the Play Store, you can use what is called the Aurora Store, which is a store that will proxy your traffic to Google servers, basically. So this way you can install Play Store apps without actually needing the Play Store services. Download a VPN, obviously, and make sure you enable those embargoed security updates. And enable LTE-only mode. This will, like I mentioned earlier, it won't protect you against all cellular attacks, but it will make you moderately more secure because it prevents those Stingray downgrade attacks. And set your USB-C port to charging only, assuming that you don't need it for like Android Auto or whatever else you might be using it for. Under a normal threat model, you can leave most settings at their default. It will be fine enough for you. If you are extremely paranoid, you have like a more advanced threat model, there is a page here which has some recommendations for settings that you should toggle from the defaults. Conclusion. Let's do a quick summary of what I've talked about so far. Stock Android has significant privacy and security issues. Data brokers and nation states both routinely target Android users by exploiting these issues. And GrapheneOS significantly reduces your risk, but does not completely protect you from everything. And now I'm going to leave you off with a little call to action. Most of you are security professionals, and as security professionals, our job isn't just to keep companies safe. Our job is to keep ourselves, our loved ones, our communities safe. So if we think back to, at the start of this talk, I had all of you raise your hand if you knew someone who is potentially at risk for surveillance. Everyone raised their hands. I want all of you to think of those people, those loved ones who are potentially at risk, and think of how you can potentially help them understand the risks and mitigate those risks. If that means trying to recruit someone to use GrapheneOS, hell yeah. If that means like getting someone to install a VPN, go for that. Whatever you can do to make sure that people in your life that you care about are more informed about what threats they are facing, that is a really good way to make the world a better place. Here are my citations. I'm going to skip through them because you can see them online. Like I said, so this talk, I'm going to upload it to my GitHub. I have a QR code to it here, so I'm going to leave it up for a little bit. It's not on there yet. The GitHub is currently like blank, but I promise I will upload it by the end of today.
Oh my gosh, is that a Rickroll?
It is not a Rickroll. All right, and don't put your phones away. I have another QR code for you after this. You might be thinking that it's the talk feedback QR code. No, it is actually, I am looking for a job. So yeah, if you are looking for someone with like years of pen testing experience, I have a DEF CON black badge if that's of any interest to you. Hire me. I'm looking for offensive security roles. So thank you very much, everyone. This was a very fun talk. It was very fun giving the talk. I think we actually have time for questions, which I was not expecting. So, yes.
Well, can I install Arch Linux on my Android phone?
So I believe there are ways of installing, like there are Linux phones. And so I'm sure that there is, I know that there is an ARM version of Arch. You can probably make it work, but I don't recommend it. So the question was whether I'm aware of any like malware vendors like Pegasus or whatever, which are specifically targeting GrapheneOS. I'm not aware of any of them specifically targeting Graphene. I'm sure that they are all very actively researching how to make their exploits work on Graphene, and it's unclear which of them do work, which of them do not work, because they're very secretive. But so the question was, I mentioned that the Titan M2 and the modern iPhone's security chips are seemingly secure. So how long would I expect it would take for a 0-day to show up in those? It's hard to say. The Titan M2, I will say, has been out since whatever the Pixel 6 launch, which I think was 2021, if that sounds about right. So roughly 5 years. And if there were a way to like brute force pins on that, Celebrate would definitely already have that. Or at the very least, if somebody out there has one of those ways, most likely Celebrate would have it by now. Maybe the NSA has something, I don't know. But yeah, the question was if there's a longitudinal study of the security lifetime of a device compared to its cost. I don't know of any. I I guess like a related thought which doesn't quite answer your question is that Graphene does commit to supporting all of its devices for at least 7 years at the moment. So in this case, or at the very, I think that maybe the way they phrase it is they support it for as long as there are security updates from the vendor officially, and then possibly longer. So in the case of like Pixels, modern Pixels have Google commits to providing security patches for them for at least 7 years, and Graphene commits to the same thing.
This is related to how long the police have to keep a device for.
Right, yes. Yeah, so that is an excellent point where, yeah, like the security lifetime of a device means that like if a device is likely to be secure for 7, 10 whatever years, that means that the police, if they seize your device, they're going to have to keep it in storage for however much time it takes for someone to find a 0-day in order to be able to crack it. So the question is whether Graphene works with Android Auto, and like specifically because I mentioned that in the part about disabling the USB port for data. Yes, you can set up Android Auto on Graphene. There is a part on their website which talks about that. I personally don't use Android Auto, so I can't tell you details about how it works or how well it works. But I'm seeing a skeptical look from one person in the audience. Okay, one person is confirmed to have Android Auto working on Graphene. So. The question was, is it possible for a malicious app to get information from other apps just by you opening it? The answer is like multi-layered. First of all, if you have two apps that agree to communicate with each other, so in the case of like Meta apps, for example, and Yandex, as I mentioned, what they are doing is the app sends data and listens on localhost on a specific port, and then when you open another Meta app, or when you navigate to like Facebook.com or whatever else, that website will then make connections to localhost, which I believe still works on browsers. I watched a talk last year at Bsides actually about how they're trying to get that changed. But what that means is, yes, so if both processes agree to communicate, they can either use that or like just regular inter-process communication, as long as they're on the same profile. But then also in general, like you might be able to do like a side channel attack where you might be able to like look at timings for certain computations to leak what is displayed on a screen or what computations are made by other apps, etc. So the question was about age verification requirements for operating systems and how Graphene is responding to that. I don't know. So I haven't seen, are states now requiring it on an OS level? I remember there was.
California passed.
Really?
And a bunch of other states have active bills.
Okay, interesting. I learned something new today. Yeah, I don't know how Graphene is responding to that. I don't know if they're going to be subject to that or if they have some like legal, because they aren't a US-based organization. They're incorporate, like the foundation is in Canada, and up until recently they were hosting their servers in France, but actually France became hostile towards them, so they've moved them to, I think, Toronto. Why user IDs rather than namespaces? Elaborate. Yeah, I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind that specific design decision. It would go back to when Android was being designed in what, 2004 or 2005. So, like, you could ask whoever designed it. So the question was, on stock Android, I mentioned how it can still get your location from nearby Wi-Fi networks even if your GPS is turned off. And the question is whether that will still apply basically if you have airplane mode turned on. I believe that airplane mode should turn off Wi-Fi probing. So it should defend against that. I can't say with complete confidence that will actually protect you on stock Android, but I think it should. Appreciate the clarification. Okay, so the correction, airplane mode actually won't stop Wi-Fi scanning, it turns out. How are we doing on time? We're cut off?
Last talk of the day.
Okay. All right, I'm being told that we should cut off. Thank you, everyone.